This is NBC Nightly News, Thursday, October 18th. Reported by John Chancellor.
Good evening. The war between Israel and Egypt grew in intensity today. There is reason to believe that it will get worse, and there is little to report on movements toward peace. On the east bank of the Suez Canal, a giant tank battle is now in its fifth day. Israeli Defense Minister Moshe Dayan said today that this is not yet the decisive battle. He said that will begin in a few days. In the meantime, he says Israel has gained the initiative. The Egyptians disagree. The Israelis are reinforcing their bridgehead on the Egyptian side of the canal near Ismailia, and they say Israeli tanks are being floated across the canal on rafts in daylight. The Egyptians say the Israelis there are completely surrounded and have been told to surrender. With the Syrian front relatively quiet, the outcome of the war now depends on what happens in the Sinai. And here's a report on how some of that story is developing from Liz Trotta in the Sinai.
The Israelis say they've managed to gain an advantage in the fight along the Suez, mainly because they've managed to knock out much of the Egyptian armor. This is the Gidi Pass on the Sinai Desert, one of three roads to the Suez Canal. These three roads are the key to control of the Sinai, so they are the main routes to Israel from the Suez Canal. The Egyptians were advancing towards this pass in the first days of the war. Now, the Israelis say they have pushed the Egyptians back, in some places, to the edge of the Suez Canal. Along the canal, Israeli troops are moving across the hot sand in tanks, hundreds of them. So far, the campaign here has consisted of sporadic battles. A major offensive may be in the making, but it has not yet come. A major concern for the Israelis is to take as few casualties as possible, so a full-scale strike against the Egyptians must be effective and without heavy losses. This is Liz Trotta, NBC News, with the Israeli forces on the Sinai Desert.
There's now evidence that pilots from North Korea are flying MiG jets on the Egyptian side in the war. That word comes from the Pentagon in Washington, which says that about 30 North Koreans are flying, and that they have had one encounter with the Israelis in the air over the Egyptian side of the canal. And here is John Cochran in Washington with more information on what the Pentagon knows about the war.
Despite warning signs, U.S. and Israeli intelligence officials were caught off guard when the well-coordinated Arab offensive came on two fronts. In the north, after the initial Syrian attack, an Israeli counteroffensive pushed to within 20 miles of Damascus. That front is more or less stabilized, but Israel must still keep a large armored force there. The main fighting is now in the Sinai, where the Egyptians had made inroads up from 3 to 9 miles. The Egyptians seemed content just to be on the east side of the canal under the cover of their Russian-made missiles on the west bank. The Israelis counterattacked through the middle of the Egyptians and across the canal. More than 30 Israeli tanks reinforced with artillery and infantry are now operating on the west bank. They've located and destroyed some Egyptian missile sites, and more importantly, they established an Israeli presence west of the canal. On the east bank, the Israelis, having driven a 3-mile wedge through the Egyptians, are now trying to spread out north and south, and with initial signs of success. But U.S. officials do not yet think that the Israelis are calling the tune on the Egyptian front. In the past, the Israelis have had great success taking chances, but this time they do not have an overabundance of planes, tanks, or anti-tank missiles, and until U.S. war materiel starts arriving at the front in greater numbers, it's not clear when Israel will risk an all-out offensive. John Cochran, NBC News, Washington.
In the U.S. Senate today, 67 senators signed a resolution which supports the shipment to Israel of all the planes and equipment necessary, in the words of the resolution, necessary to repel the aggressors. The Egyptian Middle East news agency reported tonight that Soviet Premier Alexei Kosygin has had 3 long meetings in Cairo with President Anwar Sadat of Egypt. But despite that, at the State Department today, there was not much to report.